Hi everyone, it's Melissa and welcome back to another installment of Pop Culture Osmosis. This is a series in which I read a very famous book and try to predict what will happen based on pop culture references. And this time I am reading Oliver Twist. I thought I had read this years ago, but I read as a child the children's illustrated classic, really a small part of the story, and I don't even really remember much of it as it is. So this is my first time reading the actual book. I am so excited to do this. It's been forever since I've done something in this series, and it's just so fun to do. First of all, let me remind you all that this is going to be chock full of spoilers. So if you don't want to know what happens in Oliver Twist, maybe don't watch this video. Now, on to the predictions. So we don't do predictions that we know. This is the royal we. I don't do predictions that I know with 100% certainty. Like, for example, I'm not going to predict that Oliver Twist asks for more gruel. We all know that happens. This is a list of things that I think I might have seen reference places or I'm pretty sure happens, but not 100% sure about. I know some of the character names like Fagin and Sykes and, oh, maybe that's it. Artful Dodger. I have watched Oliver and Company, so maybe that will help me. So my prediction number 1, Oliver is named from the alphabet. That sounds weird. That his last name was chosen alphabetically. I think I read this in the children's version, but my memory is super hazy. But I'm pretty sure that Oliver, when they're naming him, when the whoever, the person in charge of the orphanage or whatever, is giving him a last name, he says something to someone else like, oh, it was time for the letter T, so I came up with Oliver Twist. The child before him was Swift, and this one is Twist. I think I remember that. Prediction number 2 is that the workhouse sells Oliver, on the street. And this I do know where I remember this reference. It was from The Simpsons, where they're kind of spoofing Oliver Twist. Or I'm assuming they're spoofing Oliver Twist. And Principal Skinner has one of the bullies, I forget what his name is, outside. And he's ringing a bell going, boy for sale. And I'm pretty sure this comes from Oliver Twist. So the workhouse is going to be basically out of the street yelling, trying to sell Oliver. The next bit deals with Oliver's time with the gang of thieves that he becomes a part of. And this is where I am not sure exactly what happens. I know he gets out of that gang, but I'm not sure how he gets into it or out of it or what exactly happens. I'm going to guess, because I know that at some point Oliver meets some people who are kind to him in some way. I'm going to guess that the Artful Dodger tries to force Oliver to steal from them, and Oliver refuses or doesn't want to. So I think this is probably what starts conflict within the group. So prediction number 4 is Sykes shows up and Oliver flees. Mr. Sykes is so bad that Oliver is I don't care that I am getting clothed and fed here. I'll go live on the streets. I can't stay here. So that's when Oliver escapes. And prediction number 5 is that the people who had previously been kind to Oliver, I think, are the ones who end up adopting him. They actually end up being related. I feel I've seen this around, Oliver ends up with family somehow magically. And I don't think it's a adoptive family thing. I think just serendipitously, this family that so happened to be kind to him, this rich family, turn out to be his relatives. Those are my 5 predictions, and I'm going to get reading now. I got a prediction right. So Oliver Twist's name did in fact come from this alphabetical list. So it's not his family name. They don't know who his parents are. His mother basically gave birth and died, and they didn't have a chance to ask her who she was or where she came from. He was Twist because it was time for the letter T. Although the letter S was not Swift which that wasn't part of the prediction, but that name was in my head. But it was something even better, Swabble. I am loving the names in this book. Swabble, what is his, I want to say like warden, but that's not the right word, but the person who kind of oversees the workhouse is named Mr. Bumble, which I think is just great. So happy with one prediction correct. However, prediction number 2 was wrong. So I thought that they were going to be out basically yelling like boy for sale and like selling Oliver. Something similar happens, but they are not selling him. They are giving money away, like, which is just kind of baffling to me. They put up this notice. So this is after Oliver has asked for more gruel. He gets like severely punished. It's really awful. And they want Oliver off of their hands. So they put up a notice on the workhouse basically offering a young boy as an apprentice, and they are offering £5 for you to take the boy as an apprentice. Oliver went to apprentice at like an undertaker's, and the help, like the charity boy and whatever who were there, were just like awful to him, and the boy was just like a little jerk, and he started saying all sorts of insulting things about Oliver's mother. And the normally meek little Oliver, he beat the ever-loving crap out of that kid, and it was glorious. I was cheering him on all the way. But because of that outburst, things are not going to be good for him there anymore. He decides to run away, and this is the best thing that has ever happened to Oliver. I am sure he's going to go through many more harrowing ordeals. He has walked now all the way to London, like, I don't even remember how many miles. He walks for 7 days, and he has now met, what's the kid's name? He keeps calling him me Covey. What's the kid's name? I can't remember, but he finds Oliver and takes him back to somewhere where he can get lodging, and there is the Artful Dodger. Look at this absolute legend. You go, Oliver. Bit of a surprise in that Oliver has joined and left the little gang of thieves pretty abruptly. I just thought that would be a bigger chunk of the book. I know he's going to end up back there. That's definitely not the end. But essentially, he doesn't even really realize they're thieves. He goes with them, realizes as they're out on a pickpocketing mission exactly what they're doing. And he tries to run away, but then the police think he's the culprit because he's running. And the man who was pickpocketed decides to take care of Oliver because he's quite sick. So he's not in the group right now, but I know things are going to happen to send him back. I'm pretty sure that someone he encounters, like, during all of his adventures ends up, like, adopting him at the end. But I don't think it's going to be this gentleman, or I didn't think it was going to be this gentleman, because I was sure I remembered a young woman being part of that family, and I think this is just the older gentleman. But then part of me was like, no, maybe it is him, because as they are, like, at the courthouse, he's looking at Oliver's face, and he's like, oh, his face looks so familiar, kind of. And so maybe he knew Oliver's mother, because when Oliver's mother got to the workhouse and gave birth to him, her family didn't know where she was. So there are probably family members out there that don't know that Oliver exists. So maybe it's actually this older gentleman that will adopt Oliver at the end that ends up being his relative, but I'm uncertain now. Okay, a pretty big clue that the place that Oliver is staying right now with Mr. Brownlow is that they are related. So there's this portrait of a woman in the room, and Oliver is quite taken with it, and he thinks, oh, she's so beautiful, but her eyes are so sorrowful. And there's just so many, like, glaring hints to me that, like, that's his mom, that's a portrait of his mother, and that this is actually his family. Right after I finished filming the last clip, I read on, and like a page later, Mr. Brownlow comes in the room to check on Oliver. And I again, he's thinking about how, oh, Oliver just looks so familiar to me, but I can't place him. And then he realizes that Oliver looks exactly like the woman in the portrait. Another winner in the name department, Mr. Grimwig, has arrived on the scene. Oliver is back in the clutches of Fagin's gang, and I mean, I knew this was going to happen, but it's still upsetting. Checking in with my list of predictions, because I haven't really kept up with them, I have failed predictions 3 and 4. So my third prediction had been that the Artful Dodger tries to make Oliver steal from the people who had showed him kindness. And the Artful Dodger isn't really in this as much as I thought. Well, I'm about halfway through, so up until now, maybe he plays a bigger role in like later chapters, or maybe it's just that name, Artful Dodger, that is memorable, and that's why he has kind of survived as a character in our cultural consciousness, I guess. But yeah, he doesn't try to make Oliver steal. Oliver goes out with them, like, he doesn't realize they're going to be pickpocketing. But no one makes him try to steal. I guess the gang as a whole wants him to steal, but when he notices what they're doing, he flees. And I guess after the fact, they try to blame it on him because he's apprehended by the police. They're totally willing to let him take the fall for stealing. And then my fourth prediction was that Mr. Sykes shows up. And he's like, big scary guy. And Oliver like flees. Like, he realizes this group is way worse than I thought. Like, I gotta get out of here. But Oliver doesn't escape because Mr. Sykes shows up. He doesn't even meet Mr. Sykes when he's initially in Fagin's gang. The kind gentleman that the boys stole from takes him into his house, like realizes that it wasn't him, takes him into his house and helps nurse him back to health, I guess, or his servants nurse Oliver back to health. And then Mr. Sykes, with the aid of Nancy, a young woman who kind of is also part of the wider gang. I'm not really sure who she is, but Nancy and Sykes kidnap, basically, Oliver and bring him back to Fagin. So Oliver does not run away because of Mr. Sykes. He's brought back because of Mr. Sykes. I'm still not really sure who Sykes is, like what he has to do with Fagin and his gang. Like, in the Disney movie Oliver and Company, Fagin runs the gang of thieves, but Sykes is kind of like his boss, not really his boss, but in the book, it's not really clear the relationship between Sykes and Fagin, if they just kind of sort of know each other. Sykes borrows Oliver from Fagin to bring him to do other robberies and stuff. So obviously Fagin is under his thumb in some way. I don't know. I've got 2 more glorious names for you. A Mr. Chickweed and my personal favorite, Mr. Blathers. A+. I wasn't expecting the mystery element surrounding Oliver's parentage. So there's this whole, I don't even want to say subplot, because it's the plot now of trying to figure out what inheritance is owed Oliver. There's some piece of jewelry or something that Oliver's mother had on her when she died that got stolen by one of the nurses at the workhouse or wherever. But then that nurse confessed on her deathbed and gave it to someone else, and now there's this guy asking around, and that woman gave it to him, and he threw it in the river because he doesn't want anyone to find out who Oliver, that Oliver's owed this inheritance. So there's all of this secret keeping and mystery solving going on. So the woman in the portrait was his mother, but he's not related to the gentleman who took him in, nor is he related to this other family that he becomes involved with, who are also kind to him. So my prediction of the people who are kind to him being his relation is wrong. They might end up adopting him or taking him in or whatever, but like the crux of my prediction was really that they were going to be his relatives, but they are not. The gentleman, Mr. Brownlow, who has the portrait, it was his like friend or acquaintance who is the father, and he had this portrait. Mr. Brownlow didn't know anything about Oliver existing, but he had this portrait of this woman who he had like an affair with, or they weren't married, so it was kind of like the secret. And when this man was like leaving, he couldn't bear to leave the portrait behind, but he couldn't take it with him, so he left it with his friend Mr. Brownlow to take care of. So that explains how Mr. Brownlow recognized Oliver, and like that woman is his mother, but he's not related to Mr. Brownlow. And if you haven't kept track of what I'm trying to explain, I could barely keep track of it as I was reading it. Don't mind the heating pad. I got some weird shoulder neck thing happening because I don't know how to sleep. So, we are almost at the end. I have but a few pages left. Something I just want to complain about a little bit. So we're coming to the end where things are getting resolved and people are getting their comeuppance. So Sykes has accidentally hanged himself. That's a thing that happened, which, like, is fine. The guy was a cruel brute. But you know who didn't deserve to die? His dog. How dare you, Charles Dickens? So Sykes is on this like roof trying to escape because he's murdered somebody, and like everyone realizes he's like hiding out in this house, so they're like trying to get in to get him. And he gets onto the roof and he's going to like jump down into this like canal or ditch or something. And he accidentally hangs himself on the rope he's going to climb down with. And then his dog, who also clambers up under the roof following him, tries to jump on Sykes's shoulders, and he falls down and like hits his head on a rock. That dog did nothing wrong. Also, Fagin has gone to trial and been sentenced to hang. So that's all happened. But here's the thing. So in all of the like revealing of the mystery of Oliver's parentage, we also find out that not only is he the son of that woman in the portrait, and like Mr. Brownlow knew the father and blah blah blah, the father had another daughter, and that line leads to Rose, who I don't think I've even mentioned in this vlog because her character's kind of boring. Like I didn't mention her, but Oliver gets taken in by Mr. Brownlow like early on, and then later in the book he is taken in by this other family. In that part of that family is Rose, who is a young woman. And I think I have mentioned that I thought that the family that takes in Oliver, that like adopts Oliver, who ends up being his actual like kin, there was a young woman, which is why I was so like confused when he was being cared for by Mr. Brownlow. Rose is actually his cousin, aunt, I don't know. They're related. So I therefore think my last prediction will be true. I'm going to finish the book now, but I'm assuming Oliver goes to live with them. I'm still wrong. I think, I don't want to go upstairs and like get the notebook I have my predictions in. But I think the way I worded the last prediction was that the people who had been kind to Oliver, of which there are two sets of people, end up being related to him and adopting him. So I think both have to be true. And Mr. Brownlow ends up adopting Oliver as his son. But he's not related to Oliver. The other family is related to Oliver, but they don't end up taking him in. I'm still wrong. I finished, and there was a lovely bit of karma at the end. So Mr. Bumble and his wife, Mr. Bumble, if you'll remember, his title is Beadle, which I'm really not sure what that is, but he's kind of like the, not caretaker, warden, like he looks after the workhouse, or is some sort of like I think, county position that he holds or something. The important thing is he and his wife made things like miserable for the children who like lived there, and also they had found out about like Oliver's past, that his mother had this locket that was stolen, and they hid that information and basically kept Oliver from his inheritance. And they were like, basically he was stripped of his office, and so he and his wife become poor, and they end up in a workhouse. Yeah, I think overall it was a compelling, interesting read. I think the characters really kind of like sell the story. I don't think the story is anything brilliant in and of itself. There are a lot of coincidences, and you really have to suspend your disbelief for a lot of this, but I thought it was a fun read and I enjoyed it. So that's it for this vlog. Thanks for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.